Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. We're going to jump into Hebrews 12. If you haven't read it, go ahead and read it and then come and hear a few of my thoughts about it. There's no way we could cover everything and all of the symbolism in all of these amazing chapters because they are so rich with reference to Old Testament realities and Hebrew traditions. But I'm going to do what I can to just pull out a couple of things that I found really interesting about Hebrews 12, and I'm excited to hear about what stood out to you as well. But to begin with, I want to just jump back to the end of Hebrews 11 without Cleo on the swing set, and just pay attention to these last couple of verses in Hebrews 11 that says, all of these who commended through their faith, all of these heroes that we read about yesterday, they didn't receive what was promised. They didn't actually get to witness with their eyes or live through the realities of the Messiah coming to earth. But it says, God has provided something better for us, and apart from us, they won't be made perfect. Until Jesus comes back, until Jesus had come back, they wouldn't have been made perfect in their faith. What we're reminded of here is that we have the incredible privilege of not just having access to faith and the knowledge of God of the Old Testament and God's promises that were so faithful and true then, but we actually have the privilege of viewing this life from the perspective of those after Jesus, after the cross, after the ascension. We get to live out faith, not just understanding that there is a God in heaven who loves us, but also with the knowledge and the proof that there was a man called Jesus who lived on the earth, who died on the cross, and who was witnessed by so many people living again after that, who conquered death, who conquered the grave, who overcame sin, and who has, through his actions, provided grace for us all to be forgiven. We get to live in that arena of faith. And so if all of these people can live in the way that they lived to please God before that fact, how much more can we live to please God now knowing what we know? So then Hebrews 12 flows straight into that, and it says, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and every sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race before us. You know, you might have a different version. Yours might say, let us throw off the sin which so easily entangles us. What I love is that we have Hebrews 11 as this list of incredible evidence that has gone before us, and now we have a charge to action. Hebrews 12 is a whole charge to action. Be inspired by Hebrews 11 and then step up and do something about it. And we're encouraged in the first couple of verses to two very clear calls to action. The first one is throw off every sin. I love that this verse is not directed or addressed to the enemy. It's not addressed to the spiritual powers and forces of this world to leave us alone. It's directed to us as believers. Because you have such a great legacy, lean into that legacy and throw off the things that are not going to see you get to the point of faith that God has created you to live in. Throw it off. It's an action that we have to take. We are responsible and we have the power to shake off the things that hold us back. So every laziness and apathy and lethargy, every element of pride and arrogance and self-centeredness, all greed and lust and selfishness of the flesh, all striving and wanting to live for appearances, whatever sin means to you, God is saying, throw it off. People before you have done it, you have access to even more power and confidence because of what you've seen. Throw it off. So that's the first port of call. That's the first call to action that we are called to. And then the second one is run with endurance the race marked before you. Run with perseverance. It's this idea of this determined and steady focus to run our race. And this word race is a word that also is used for conflict and struggle. Be determined and steadily devoted to continuing on in your struggle, your conflict, the race set before you. Continue, keep going. These are the calls to action. They're actually very simple. Throw off sin, because that is within your power and your authority to do that. And continue to run steadily the things that God has placed in front of you. And then it says, look to Jesus. Look to him. If you focus on him, you will not be able to focus on the other things that distract you or take you off course. Focus your eyes on Jesus, who for the joy set before him endured the cross. What was the joy set before him? It was heaven. It was eternity. And so once again, we get this reminder that yes, what we do here on earth is so important, but actually our focus should be on eternity and on eternal things. Jesus focused on eternity. So when we look at him, that becomes our motivating factor too. So we then hear about how Jesus did not get weary, how he endured far more than most of what we endure. And we hear about this good father, this father who disciplines us. This section reminds me so much of John 15, about the pruning of the branches. The fact that discipline is just, it's not only about us not being allowed to do something or not being able to access something, but it's actually about us being pruned for our own good so that we might, in verse 10, share in his holiness. And in verse 11, yield the peaceful fruit of righteousness. God is not trying to limit our lives or contain our lives. He's trying to help us be as fruitful as we can possibly be. And again, there's this call to action in verse 12. Lift your drooping hands and strengthen your weak knees. Rise up and make straight paths for your feet. There is something of a charge in this. You know, faith is about not just what we believe. It has to start there, and that's why this book has taken us on a journey of belief and questioning and refining our beliefs. But now it's a call to action. If you believe those things truly and completely in your heart, then rise up, strengthen yourself in these truths, and walk it out. That's what counts as people of faith. Walk it out. It says, strive for peace with everyone and for holiness. That's what we need to be living out, not religion under the law that tells us we have to do certain things, that we're obligated to do certain things through ritual, but holiness that comes from being close to Jesus, spending time with him and wanting to imitate him to the world around us. And it says, see that no root of bitterness springs up among you to cause trouble. Bitter plants in the Hebrew culture were basically poisonous plants. So we can read this as bitterness as we know bitterness to be, you know, unforgiveness or offense. But actually, it's any root of poison that would, earlier on in verse 15, it says, see anyone fail to obtain the grace of God. Ultimately, that's religion. See that no religion springs up among you that would get in the way of the grace of God. We have to keep our own hearts and lives clean, and we have to make sure that the communities that we live out our faith within, our church communities, our believers communities, don't have those roots of bitterness in them either. So we finish up hearing about a kingdom that cannot be shaken. You know, we've got reference here to Israel and Mount Sinai, and you can read about it in Exodus 19. But the contrast between that kind of fear and trembling and then us and Mount Zion, which is heaven, the fact that there's rejoicing there are angels there, that there's this incredible assembly of Jesus and righteousness, and this incredible promise about the sprinkled blood of Jesus that says it is done, contrasting with the blood of Abel that says we have to secure justice for ourselves. We have to live under the law so that justice will be done. Jesus's blood says justice has already been won and you can now enjoy it. So again, incredible verses that we just don't maybe fully have the time to unpack in their fullness. But finally, I love that it says, therefore, let us be grateful for receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken. This world that we are called to is not temporary, and it does not depend on the shifting things of the world. It's an unshakable kingdom that we get to inherit. We're receiving it all the time. It is done. The promise is received. The principle and the power of heaven is already sealed forever, but we are receiving it in our life here on earth. Until we get to be present there, we're continually having it built in our hearts, and let us offer to God acceptable worship with reverence and awe, because our God is a consuming fire. I love the fact that this finishes with such strength that compels us to live out the faith that we've been called to. Okay, guys, we're going to finish it up tomorrow, but please do stop by the comments and tell me what you understand this chapter to mean and how you're going to live it out.